Hello, welcome to Podsongs. I'm Jack Stafford and I interview inspiring people as inspiration for new songs. When I launched my last album, Deeper, I went on podcasts because I wanted to talk in depth about the subject material. It's about the mind, meditation, Buddhism, and the first podcast I went on was called Zen Commuter, and I had such a wonderful experience. It inspired me to go on more and eventually led me to launch my own podcast. So let me return the favour. Let me please introduce you to meditation teacher, podcast host, Thom Walters.
There it is.
Hello, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to see you again.
It's my pleasure because I'm returning the favor. I was a guest on your show first, way back
Absolutely. When. Way back when, months ago.
the Zen Commuter, because you have two shows, don't you? You have the Zen Commuter and 5 Minute.
Well, it was funny because this had three different names, so I can understand. Originally, it was like way back in the day when Zen Commuter started. It was Zen Commuter PM, and that sounds very bedtime magic, which is like a radio show here. Then it went to 5 Minute Mojo, and now it is Calmer in 5, and it's been Calmer in 5 for about a couple of years now. So
how do you? I mean, you're doing 2 podcasts a day. I mean,
well, it's funny because. Wow, there are. I guess I got the job for today. It's a total labor of love. So it's like it's not like going to the old man. Here I go. I gotta go. I don't know, bad books or no disrespect to people that balance. But yeah, it's enjoyable, and many times, as I'm sure you can attest, when I'm doing the podcast, sometimes I'm tapping into something much higher than myself. So I've listened to podcasts like more Calmer in 5, but some Zen Commuter as well. Exactly. Well, actually,
tapping. I only heard about it. I only just heard about tapping. So, have you heard of tapping?
Oh no, I was just emphasizing my head and my heart, but I have heard about it. Yeah. I don't know what I feel about it yet. Maybe we'll talk about that sometime.
Yeah. Oh, I thought you knew everything. Yeah, I mean, you're the meditation guru, so
I have the entire world's knowledge in my head and in my heart. I know it all. I operate much better when I go from a standpoint of like, I don't know anything. Universe, hook me up, show me stuff.
Because I heard that because I listened to your podcast. So I heard that recently. You said it went. I don't know. It's like a philosophical. Who said that? You were quoting them on your podcast. This monk.
I forget, to be honest with you. Well, see, so I don't know everything. Well, one of my mom's favorite quotes was. The wisest man is the person who realizes they know nothing. I'm like, oh. And I think that came from Socrates, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I think that's an easy one. Yeah. I'm not gonna question you because you had 1,500 episodes or something like that. So
not yet.
No?
About 10 away. 10 away.
Gosh.
Yep. And then just 1,000 of Calmer in 5. So.
Just 1,000.
I can't wait to be back for your 1,500 show.
Yeah, I hopefully delegate it by then. I'll have funnier, better musicians.
Oh, well. Are there any? Wait.
Oh.
Nice.
So what did you know? So what did you? Because I've just started out on my pod. I listened back to my last podcast recording. So there's this terrible echo there. I only just realized. So I've now put up all these curtains around the room, and I've got a curtain hanging over my bicycle and some yoga mats on the floor to absorb the sound. So I'm still like baby steps,
But isn't it great? And it's so funny because when my first shows came out, I listened to a couple of them the other day. And but it was when I go back now, obviously, I'm like, figured it out, no worries. And that was one of the things I had to figure out too. It was like my room had no furniture in it, no rug, and I was just like, "Welcome, to Colorado." Like, oh, that's horrible. That's horrible.
And I just
But we
found
all
out.
figured it out.
Yeah, I just found out Zoom can record 2 separate audio files as well. So, yeah.
Astonishment. I did not know that. Oh,
Yeah, it's just in the settings.
Holy, that's awesome. Oh, thank you so much. There are times that I go into mine. I'm like, oh, wait, I'll have a guest sometimes, and their audio will sometimes it'll be great, sometimes it'll be horrible, sometimes my audio for some reason will be horrible. So that's good that I can go in and change those.
Tom, listen, this is not the thing you misunderstand in this interview. This is you giving me podcast advice, not I'm not here. I've only you're my 14th guest. I mean, I 12th guest, 12th. I've done this is my 12th show. So I don't know why you should be learning things from me.
Well, you know what? What's so cool is like give and take.
Okay, all right.
I mean, that's what's so cool about the world. I mean, I love meeting so many different people because they're even at 56, a young, vibrant 56. I'm still learning stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. But getting back to the podcast, I'm like, what can I teach you? I'm like, a sound. You already know. You're a sound guy anyway. So, I mean, you're a musician. So.
Yeah, but I'm not a recording engineer. I always go into the studio. I rock up with, we cold stubble and try a badly tuned guitar and break a string and then make me sound good. That's like asking a TV presenter to say, insert a great analogy here, because I'll be there.
Look at you. You're even going to edit. Well, back in the day, that was talk about a challenge for Zen Commuter because the shows were about 40 minutes and I'd literally record the whole thing, then go back minute by minute. I'm like, take out that. Oh, that doesn't sound good. Let me re-record that. And then it took it got to be like 2.5 hours. And I'm like, music component. But hey, right now, if I'm like doing something and either I get tongue tied or there's a noise in the back, I'm like, oh, no, just go back. Let's try that again. And there are times, this is an insider. Like people won't expect this at all. So there are times I'm like doing Zen Commuter and I'm clearly not channeled in those instances. I'm like, come on, mouth. What is with you today? Back, I'm like, back again. Come on. Like, you cannot be stressing doing Zen Commuter, mister.
Yeah. I mean, it has to be perfect, So let me get this straight. You're not, because you sound so professional. It all comes out in such a smooth, no mistakes. So you're touching up afterwards.
Oh yeah, a little bit. And those times I'll tell you about happen every now and then. But with that said, I'm the whole time along. I'm just like, so if we think about this, I'm like, oh, no, that doesn't work. So just bring back the, I don't know. Do you use GarageBand or you do Audacity? What do you use to record?
I just use the Zoom recordings.
Oh, really? Oh, really? So how have you been editing up till then? Like, what do you edit in? Nothing, just
no edit. I ain't got time. I haven't got time to edit. I'm writing a song. I focus on the song. So I'm editing the song. That's, if you want to hear a polished, go back and, you got like Joe Rogan. So he just leaves 3 hours, 4 hours. So that's kind of what I'm going for.
Yeah, well, Joe Rogan also has probably like 15 people. He just like talks, like there, throws them the file. There it is. Make it sound good. Like,
yeah. And someone he could do his exact voice and insert funnier bits, Yeah.
Oh man, oh man. Oh, that's cool. So yeah, so I just edit as I go along. So if it does indeed sound smooth, that's why. And as I said in the
Made me
beginning
feel so
days.
much better.
Well, with that said, there are days where I'm just like, oh, that's cool. I didn't have to touch a thing. And as I go forward, I'm going to be doing. I'll be probably moving Zen Commuter to YouTube as well. So in those cases, I won't be recording. It's just going to be a full shot. So not every episode. I'm going to start small.
Okay. Talking of bad audio, I think it's cutting in and about a bit. Is it your end? Is it a bad connection, or is it good quality with you? Am I got? Maybe we turn off the video and yeah, let's stop video. See if that because it's bad that we're talking about audio quality while recording bad audio.
while it's going to hell.
Yeah, that's like insert great analogy here. You know, you're rowing out,
Yeah.
the water's fit.
Oh, that's too funny. Nice. Well, that's the next thing I have to get for my Zoom calls is a fancy picture. So when I go away, it's not just that little avatar, that blank avatar thing. I need a sharp picture like you got there.
Yeah,
Singing into the mic.
Well, one thing I'm enjoying with the podcast, so if we could just talk about me for a minute, is the
absolutely.
podcast. Yeah, it's the I like doing the artwork as well because I do all the do an album and then do a song, and so I have an album cover or a single cover there, and I'm trying to do an image as well for the actual podcast guest episode recording interview. So yeah, that's these things all take more time, but it's like that 1% extra now, make it a little 1% better every time.
There you go. I actually just peeled your picture off the web, of which there were many pictures. So I'm like, okay, that's a good one. I didn't take one from like 20 years ago or one that had lettering or anything on it. I'm like, oh, now that is and that's a cool thing because I like of all the pictures when I went out onto the web, I'm like, okay, I just met with Jack. I'm like, which picture encompasses what we just talked about? How so obviously I didn't do the video clip of Toy Boy or when you're like 19. I'm like, you know what? We talked about some deep stuff. That's a picture that looks deep.
The Toy Boy, yeah. I mean, doing the animation, doing the video photo for that would not be talking about meditation or.
No.
That's pretty.
Young and carefree.
Yeah. Don't
now
go
you're
backwards.
stodgy.
Flabby. Okay, no, but so that's the technical side of the podcast. So what else about because your content, well, Zen Commuter is what I listen to, and it's fantastic. And you have so many interesting guests there. I mean, so you started out as a general podcast, and you became a meditation podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So it started out as pretty much just a positivity podcast, but I think every episode focused on could change our life for the better. So sometimes I'd read different posts, sometimes talk about sleep, sometimes talk about exercise, sometimes talk about meditation. And it was just everything was focused on living a fuller life. And then I don't even know if it was a meditation or I definitely meditated about it a while. And then I'm like, this is cool, but like if I think about my life, like how do I get the most out of life? And everything obviously points to meditation. My life is so much fuller because of meditation. I'm like, maybe people want to hear about that. And I'll be perfectly transparent. I'm like, okay, if I niche down to meditation, I'm like, is there going to be enough to talk about? I mean, is that going to be going too far down that people are going to be like, oh, yeah, am I going to lose half my audience because they're like, I don't really meditate, or I liked it when you started talking about fitness or eating or emotional eating or whatever. I'm like, I can lose a lot of my audience. I'm like, And then obviously I meditated on it. And the message said, this is where you find your peace, and many people will find peace in it as well. So ditch the fear and just go forward. I'm like, okay. And as you might expect, that was great advice.
Yeah, what do you expect? Going into the silence. Yeah, take the question into the silence and you get the answer, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. Every time. Well, I shouldn't say well, you will every time. Maybe not on time, but that's one thing I tell listeners as well. Sometimes you take questions, your meditation, looking for wisdom and guidance, and sometimes you might not get it. And sometimes you will, but that's you'll always get it, but maybe not on the time frame that you're expecting. Obviously, if you're like, I've got a question, I'm going to meditate, then I'll get an answer. Like, well, it might happen. The universe might say, you need a couple more reminders down the road. So I'll give you an answer in about a month. How's that sound?
But no, that's great. I mean, I'm learning so much from my guests. I'm really, everyone I'm getting an education from. So,
oh, absolutely.
You found that as well?
Oh my God. That is one of the most amazing parts of Zen Commuter. Is just not only linking to people that share a similar viewpoint of the world and know about the same kind of things, but I just love listening to, I just love meeting new people and just sharing ideas and just knowing that there's light and growth out in the world, and that the work that I'm doing is being done, and I do this already, obviously, is being done in different parts of the world by different people, and just seeing how they come at it is just amazing. And to your point, just learning so many different things. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So yeah, I get jazzed by guests.
So what kind of things have you learned? What were some standout like moments from guests?
So yeah, so I'm digging it.
Did you get that question? I just asked you what kind of standout moments of lessons have you learned from guests? What would you say were, that you've incorporated into your own practice?
Yeah, so I didn't get that question. We must have hit an internet snag. But if I think about it, this might sound a little, I don't say arrogant, but like, the guests that I have basically have the same way of looking at the world as I do. Well, their feelings about the world are the same as that I have, but they bring to it in a different way. I think one of the guests that I enjoyed speaking with the most, and I hope I'm not dissing everybody else because I absolutely love all my guests. Obviously, I'm not just saying that. Like, I've never had a show where I'm like, oh, that was painful. No, I literally have enjoyed and got something out of every show. But I would say Dr. Peter Wybrow, and he was way back in the beginning days of Zen Commuter, before meditation. But Dan Millman, the author, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, that was a great episode, great interview. So yeah. I like that one because, sorry. I was just going to say, I like that one because I don't know if I told you this when we met, that I had read his book when I was a kid, like when I was like 20 years old. My mom had given it to me and she said, I think you might enjoy this. And I read it. I'm like, oh my God, that was awesome. I'm like, wow, this guy is really, really amazing. And then I remember sending off a note one day. I was just like, you know what? I'm like, I'm sure he's not going to say yes. I'm like, if I even get a response, I'll be amazed. But like, so I zip off an email, search the web, find his email address. He's like, oh yeah, I'd be more than happy to be on your show. I'm like, huh? What?
Wow, you get to meet your heroes. Yeah, it's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm like, oh my God, life is so good. Thank you, universe. You love your boy.
I know. I mean, when I read the newspaper or watch, or watch TV or something like, not that I have, but when I watch TV again, is that everyone could be a potential guest. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that great to think about too? Because I remember that I think we all have a level of not like an inferiority complex, but our society kind of here in the United States anyway, and I'm sure it must be the same in Italy and in England as well, where it's like we put these people on pedestals, these celebrities, and thinking, I'm like, they're not gonna have time for friggin' piddly old me, and so we before we even step out of the gate, we're like, oh, I'm not gonna write them, like they're not gonna talk to me, but for me, way back in the day, and I'm sure you're probably finding out way before I did, I'm like, you know what? No guts, no glory. I'm like, I'm going to put it out there, and if it's meant to be, it'll be. So there are a lot of people that I'm thinking, oh, I wouldn't have expected you to say anything, and they've been guests on the show, which is awesome. And the better thing is, like way back in the day, I'd spend days. I'm like just going through. I'm like, would they be a great guest? And not even worry about it. I'm like, I don't care if they walk the red carpet, if they've had, won 12 Grammys, or if they're, a peace activist that, has won the Nobel Peace Prize. If I think they're going to be good for the show, I'm like, I don't care. Can't hurt to ask.
But do you read everyone's, because everyone has put out a book usually. Do you have to read every book that every week?
Depending on, because I just got done with the guests, and if they're listening, I got most of it done. But yeah, so a lot of times I have authors on the show, and their publicists will send me a copy of the book, and I'll read it. Sometimes it depends. If I've got a show in 2 days and they're like, I just got their book, I'm like, there's no way I can read a book in 2 days. I got other stuff to do. So I'll just skim and extract the main points, and we'll go from there, question wise.
But do you, so that's your reading material now in your life, just books from publicists, yeah?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, I'm falling a bit behind. I mean, I've got, there's so many, people put a lot of work into a book, and it's a lot of thought, and it's, so I feel like I have to read it all, but I'm not a speed reader, and I am getting a bit behind, so.
Well, don't stress about that. Yeah. If there's one guy that can tell you not to stress, it would be me.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it's to try and get you have to just get the essence. Yeah, just read the book jacket or something in the end.
Yeah, I mean, for me, depending on how I'm doing for time with guests, and sometimes their publicists will get it to me late. I'm like, it comes in the mail on Tuesday, and I've got to do the show on Thursday. Excuse me. So I'll be like, I'll just read the good news is the publicists send me what's kind of like an info sheet, and it talks about what the book is, what it's talking about, and a little bit about the author. So I get a lot from that. And then I just go into table of contents, and I'm like, okay, what can I extract from this? Like what chapters encapsulate the book more? What's more lead in, lead out, whether it be some scientific stuff or whatever. It's just like, I just go for the crux. I had a great talk yesterday with two wonderful people from Australia. And they wrote a book. It'll be out this week, called The 10 Terrains. And it talks about how people exist in their lives, or multiple lives, going through what they call terrains, and how a terrain is basically a way of coming to the world from a certain viewpoint. And, they're, for want of a better word, denser terrains where, you're totally ego, and you're totally thinking about, okay, I'm only human, and this is my world. And then as you kind of move along the terrains, you become more, some of the more the higher terrains, and not that they're hierarchical, but the other terrains kind of let you know that you're not just a human, that you're integrated into the collective of all human life, and even then past that. But what I'm trying to say is that, so there are these 10 terrains. So the book had a talk about the 10 terrains in it, and then there was like another half a book that talked about how they got there, what this means for, how do you resolve conflict using the terrain. So I just basically poured into the 10 terrains, excuse me, and just went from there. And we had a great talk. Oh God, it was like an hour and 15 minutes, much like when we talked
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a ton of questions. I have a framework,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't say, okay, let's make sure I ask question one and then two. It's just kind of like, I'm like, okay, this is what I know the guy or woman, and this is what I want to, talk about. So if a question I might ask one question, and if that one question is the entire episode, I'm like, that's it. Because I've found, as was with us, as with these people I had yesterday, and most guests, that if I have a framework and it just goes, and it's just more like a talk, and it just is so more organic, and I think listeners enjoy it much more as well.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. Because most of the guests I've had before have been on other podcasts before, so many times. So I've listened to their other interviews, and they kind of say the same thing. They do the same interview quite a few times. So I make notes of the questions that the host asks, because if the conversation runs dry, I know what they can, because they kind of run on autopilot. So, but then I find it less interesting to interview than when I know they're going to tell me their childhood, and I've just heard them tell their childhood on another, 2 other podcasts. So
right, exactly, right. And I feel the exact same way. In fact, I think the guests themselves appreciate it more, because I tell them right from the get go. I'm like, well, your publicist said, here's a list of questions you can ask them. I said, I threw that away. I said, I don't want to do the same interview for you that you've done 12 times. And they're actually really thankful. They're like, oh, thankful. I'm like, yeah, we're just going to talk. We're going to talk about whatever comes up. We're going to talk about your book, obviously, but we're going to talk about how it works in life, what your life is like. And I think listeners get much more out of hearing about people being transparent and normal, as opposed to, just like,
yeah, you could tell when they're on autopilot, though. I mean, when in an interview, and I mean, they're just big. But some of the guests are quite difficult. They just, like, I had one guy on. There's a doctor, who's quite an older guy, and he just spoke for the whole interview. So I couldn't get a word. I could not get a word in. So, and he was telling the same answers that I'd heard him tell hundreds of times before on these other shows. So it's difficult now. I mean, you don't interrupt people, but you want to keep it interesting. So,
yeah, exactly. No. Well, the other thing too is talking about what we were talking about earlier too is treating guests. Well, you treat every human with respect, but I think if you put any guest on a pedestal, then you've taken, like, the shift of the energy kind of becomes, I'm a lesser part of this story. So one of the things I like is when I meet guests, I'm like, I don't care if you've got 7 degrees. I don't care if you've, like, cured cancer. I'm like, we're just talking, and I've got as much to add as you do. So and when I respect their input and they respect mine, it just flows.
So you think it helps to, like, research them a bit less? Maybe does that help? So it's a bit more surprised, like the first time, or I'm just worried I might dry up, in the interview, and then like there's some obvious thing about them that I don't know, and I sound silly or something.
Oh yeah. Well, so to that point, I definitely always do my research, but I don't always use it. So, like, for these people yesterday, I come up with 10 questions that I want to ask them.
Okay.
And it's always there. And I also had I did the notes and the research, the salient points of the book. So I'm like, if I dry up, I have this sheet by my side to work from.
Right. Okay.
And that's happened a couple of times where I'm like, we're just talking, and it seems like there's a lull. So I just glance over. I'm like, well, tell me about, and then I just look at one of my questions. And
yeah. And then they go on. Then they can. I mean, if you've written a book, you can speak for all day without, you've gone deep on that thing. So
yeah, exactly.
But so how far in advance have you scheduled? Do you schedule interviews? I mean, are you just finding out couple of weeks before, or?
Yeah, I'm pretty much. Depending on who it is, obviously. I mean, there's some people I've been trying to get, but I've got a running list. I've got a list of about 150 people.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow!
And I've got a spreadsheet, and I just I say, okay, when did I ask them? Haven't received a word back from them. So yeah, it's pretty retentive. So,
so you keep mailing them periodically every 6 months.
Yeah. Right. So I don't, yeah, I mean, if I literally, I keep track of if they responded at all, or, some people are like, hey, I'd really love to right now. I'm doing a press tour and it's really, I'm booked out through the month. I'm like, let's talk in about a month. So I just put a note in my Excel spreadsheet, get back in a month and put the date down. So I know when to get back to them. And if obviously I put somebody down and like, they haven't gotten back to me, I'm like, send another one.
Mm.
Haven't gotten back to me. I'm like, okay, they're just not going to do it. Like,
And where do you find you get some guests to recommend the next guest, or do you just find it in your reading, or how do you find out who you want to interview?
it's primarily in my reading. I mean, I've got, excuse me. Oh, yeah. Just clear my throat. I have, back in the day, I used to go out and just look. I just read. I'm like, okay, I want to talk about Tonglen meditation. I'm like, I don't know a lot about it, so let me just do a Google search. And then I'm like, okay, read a couple articles. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. or I'm like, oh, that seems like it was a blog post put out just to capture likes or whatever. I'm like, it's a paragraph. I'm like, that's not really that deep. That's not gonna be something I can do. Then I'll find something. I'll find an article. I'm like, wow, that resonates with me. That really hit. I'm like, cool. Here we go. Hey, came across your article the other day. Absolutely great stuff. I'd love to talk about it on Zen Commuter.
And does it have to be timely as well? I mean, if they put the book out 10 years ago, do you still? I mean, are they? You have to get people when they're still in publicity mode, or how does it work?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes it is authors, and sometimes it's not even authors. It's just bloggers or people that are just write about a certain topic. If I do something online, then I'll just if their article, even if their article came out 6 years ago, I mean, to your point, if they had enough passion to write about it, then it's something that's important to them. It's probably still with them. So I'll talk about that. But for the authors, yeah, it's when I started, I had to go out and get guests. But now, because Zen Commuter's been around for so long, I've got a pretty good connection with a publishing house called New World Library. And they're like, hey, we got this new book coming out. Here's the author.
Okay.
What do you think?
So you get in contact with publishers. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So they send it to me. They're like, what about this? And I'll read the little kind of blurb sheet. I'm like, yeah, sounds cool. Or conversely, it's like, I don't think so. So it's neat to go from, and it'll happen to you obviously as well, when you go from people sending you emails like, hey, I'd really love to be on your show. I'm like, oh, sweet. Yeah, let's see. To like, okay, I've sent out 20 emails and nobody's responded yet. Patience is a virtue.
For sure. And do you look at because do you look at the popularity of guests to help make your podcast more popular?
I used to back in the day, way back in the day. I'm like, I mean, way back in the day, that was my goal. I'm like, if I want Zen Commuter to be popular, I'm like, let me just get popular people. They'll share me, and then that'll be it. And I'll take over the planet. This will be great. Now I don't care. I'm like, I don't care if you're popular, if you're not popular. If you can answer the show by what you have to say. For me, and this, I don't know if this will be pertinent for you or not, but I mean, back in the day, it was. I'm like, you fall into the trap of like, wow, I want to be a Joe Rogan. I want to be a so-and-so. I want to have a popular podcast. And when ego kind of falls away, and for me, it's never been a huge ego thing, but when it falls away and says, you know what, I just want to do something that helps people live a better life. So if that's a person that wrote one blog and it really connected with me and we can talk about it and share that energy, I'm like, I'll talk about that. And if it turns out it's like, Lewis Howes, who I'd love to have on the show as well, and who's got millions of people following him, like if he wants to talk, cool. But to me, it's just not like, I'm like, okay, let's see, you got 10,000 followers. Yeah, you're gonna be on the show. It's like,
so it's not a factor.
I just love people.
But did you find that when you did have very popular people and they shared it, that you got more subscribers?
The funny thing is, no, not really. So I mean, there are definitely guests that I've had on the show. If I look back at my my rankings on on the host that I'm like, oh wow, that person really resonated. And but they weren't a person that was like hugely popular. So I think people just like listening to interesting people and hearing different things. And to that point, whether my guest shared it or their audience didn't resonate with it, that was the thing. And I think that's really a big point. So even if you're like, even if Joe Rogan says, hey, I just came across this great podcast, Zen Commuter, it's only going to resonate if it resonates. So people might go out there, but they're like, you know what? It doesn't matter. So he might have 5 million, well, he's probably got more, I don't know, he's got millions of people listening to him, but if it resonates, it's going to resonate. And if it's not, it's not. So no matter how popular somebody is, if there's not resonance there, it's not going to be anything.
So after what, apart from me, after which guests did you notice the biggest spike in your interviews? In your ratings?
Yeah, well, yours. I mean, they had to get another graph. It was like I was scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. I'm like, oh my god. Yeah.
But after me, which what gave the biggest boost to your ratings? You can see where I'm going with this. I want the formula.
I want the recipe for the sauce. There was a guy by the name of Chris Plehall, and I think his name was an interesting spelling, but he is a director, a movie producer who also meditates, and he says he gets a lot of his information, a lot of his inspiration from meditation. So he was somebody that I'm like, if I look back at the at ratings, he was probably one of the people I'm like, oh wow, I guess people liked you.
Okay.
I mean, after you.
After me. Yeah. No, because I mean, because also I can just do people that I'm interested in, but I'm still in the early stages. I need to get more listeners at the moment. I need to grow it. So, I have to, and surely by interviewing more popular people, I will get more listeners, no?
Well, I am glad that I can add hundreds of thousands of listens to your show as well.
I'm expecting a spike.
Hey, Walters, there better be a spike.
I'll send you the graph. I haven't launched this podcast yet, so I'm still in, because I've got a huge delay in it, because I have to write, record, and produce a song for each guest. So
right.
It's a lot of work, so I'm a bit...
Yeah, you've got a lot of work. I mean, not that either of us are just sitting with our feet up, but yeah, I'd say you've got, more technical, more creative stuff going on in the background.
I created a monster. Yeah.
But it's a beautiful monster. I
need to, sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I'm like, they'll be, and I'll be honest with you, there are times when you'll be like, I'm so tired. I can't do this. I don't want to. It's few and far between for me, but it does happen. I just want to be real. But my ultimate goal is obviously for my listeners. So I'm like, dude, I don't care if you didn't have the most restful night's sleep. Like, you got a responsibility to help people live a better life. So suck it up, Buttercup. Let's go.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. Exactly. Now, the good news is that in those times now, because I've got 1,490 episodes done, that there's times I'm like, either maybe my dad will call and say, hey, I really need your help. I'm like, I'm not going to say, well, I'm sorry, Dad, can't help you out. I got a podcast to do. I'll be like, okay, cool, I'll be there. And I'll just
takes the pressure off.
Yeah. So I've got, I could just do a rebroadcast and just look at something that people enjoyed, a year ago. And I'm like, okay, cool, here we go. I mean, that's what's so cool about my stuff and about your stuff too. It's pretty evergreen, meaning it's not dated at all. So I'm not talking about, McCarthyism. What's our take on McCarthyism? But there's nothing slated in time. It's just like, okay, Cool.
So once I get to 1,000 episodes, you're saying I can just rebroadcast the beginning
absolutely.
again. in perpetuity.
Yeah, exactly. Your podcast will be on the other side of the universe, but our podcast will still be going.
Yeah. But did you because Joe Rogan, like, he does a show at, like, how many is it, 4 shows a week? I mean, is that, and you're doing one every day, no? I mean, so have you found that regularity is more of a, because I'm aiming for 2 per week, so I'm hoping that's what I can manage.
So the most important thing I could say is consistency at all. So if you can do 1 show every 2 weeks, 1 show a week, whatever it is, you're and I say this respectfully, your guests are not going to go looking for you. Maybe they will once you become better, but they, I know for me, listening to podcasts, I'm like, oh, cool. So-and-so shows on Tuesday at 9:00. So when I was driving to work and we were all driving to work, I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just turn this on. It'll be there. So they expect you to be there. So whatever your schedule is, stick to it, because consistency is it. I had, there was a guy in my mastermind group who did a podcast on aging gracefully and aging in general. And I couldn't impress upon him enough. He's like, well, I got another show coming out. He's like, well, I got to get the guests. And I'm like, he's like, well, I got a lot of stuff going on with marketing. And I'm like, he's like, I'm going to have it out in about 2 weeks. I'm like, dude, I say this respectfully. Nobody's going to look for your show. It needs to be consistent. They need to say Monday at whatever, Lee's show comes out, and they'll be there. So consistency.
Okay. The 3 C's.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, because yeah. So you think it has to be? Because I was wondering if I could just drop in and out, but no, you're saying I need to keep it going.
So I definitely in the beginning, and even I would even say I mean, the other thing too is to have a profound respect for your listeners, and not just say, I'm like, once I got them, they're going to stay with me forever. It's like, well, that's not going to be the case. So you want to keep delivering things that add value to people's lives. But to your point, it's more important to have consistency than regularity. So if you can do a show once a month and everybody knows it's the 2nd of the month, cool. Jack's show is going to be out. They'll come if you get that flow.
But do they listen to it live, or does it just pop up on their app? I mean, how are people consuming most of podcasts?
Yeah, that's a good question, because they're not live per se, but I think everybody knows. Like, well, here, wait, don't tell me. A great NPR show that I listen to. I know it comes out. A new show comes out every Saturday. So I kind of, like, when I'm going down to see my dad on Sunday, I'm like, cool. I know that it dropped on Saturday, that I can listen to it as I drive down to see my dad. But to that point, if that wasn't the case, and I kept looking, I'm like, oh, that regularity was established, and then it just dropped away. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go find out what your new schedule is. So I guess I'm not listening to you anymore.
So yeah, I see what you're saying. So maybe you, on that drive, you'd look for another podcast, and then maybe you find out that you really like that one. So then the next Sunday, you just split between the two, or you listen to the new one. You've kind of lost that space in someone's life.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, guys, if you aren't bringing it on a regular schedule, then I'm not going to go looking for you. So I guess I got to find another one that's going to be ready for my drive on Sunday. So
what best? Because if I do it twice a week, what day is best? What days are best to release a podcast?
I would say, they say that beginning of the week obviously is better, because kind of people are like, okay, it's a new week. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start this week off strong. I'm going to be learning something or entertaining myself about something. Usually, I mean, just by kind of like rhythms. Towards the end of the week, people are just like, you know what? I don't want to listen to anything. I just want to get home. I just want to throw my feet up. So I'd say beginning of the week are usually good. But again, it's whatever works for your schedule. So if Monday, don't force it to happen on a Monday or Tuesday when that's not working for you. So
okay. So So just to keep it, doesn't matter, just keep it consistent. I also heard, I was reading tips, and it says launch with 3 to 5 episodes at once, because sometimes you can get a bad review for just having one. You want to bang on 5, and then.
Yeah, that's a good advice. I'd say that's valid advice.
Okay.
And it helps create that consistency too, because if you have 3 shows in the can, that's lingo.
Mm-hmm. C-A-N. Okay.
So if you have shows in the can and like you're working on a show and either the editing isn't coming along and you're like, I'm gonna miss my deadline, then you're like, you know what? I've got 5 already done. I'm like, okay, cool. I can just put this one in and continue to work on the one that's kind of slowing me down or what have you. So you always have a backup.
Okay, well, let's just to get anyone who's listening to this in the future. Today's the 22nd of August. So let's see. You will know how many I have in the can, because I'm recording about 2 to 3 a week. So
nice.
Yeah, and I'm storing them all up, and then I go to the studio I record the songs to and a click track at home here to Logic, and then I'm going to go to the studio and I record them with other musicians to do the drum and bass and just a little bit extra color. So that's the thing that's really slows me down, because I have to make each appointment in the studio. So
that's exciting, though. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear us.
Okay, well, your song could be quite boring, because at the moment it's about how to write a podcast. So this could be one of the most boring songs.
I cannot believe I would be the fodder for a boring song. So let's talk about life.
Yeah, let's talk about something else. Yeah.
We can talk about whatever you want, my friend. It's your show.
Well, it's your song, so let's talk about you pick a subject. You're the professional interviewer here. I mean, I you've done 1,480 shows, so.
Well, I haven't done 1,480 interviews, but I have done a fair amount of interviews, which is cool. Okay. So, but so you know what? I'll switch things up to the interview. Or what gave you the idea to do the show? And I'll interject stuff as well. Like when you got the idea for a podcast, like what was your mindset?
What was I doing? I had to do something to promote the Ethereal Society, because I'm in this secret society, which I don't like to talk about, as you know. So I need to do something to help promote it, and so I need to get my name out there, my music out there, and the subject out there. So what's the best way? And I was brainstorming, and I tried different things. I tried these. The normal way that musicians do it is, you release a song every 6 weeks is now the thing to do. So the Spotify algorithm keeps you in this cycle, but that's it gets you out there, but it doesn't make much of an indent. It doesn't make much of a it doesn't give you much of a boost. So I was thinking about I tried other things. I tried these quote songs where I sing quotes, and that wasn't really moving the needle as well. So yeah, but then I just came up with this, because I've always written documentary songs. I've always written songs about an article in a newspaper or somebody whose book I've read. I write songs about them anyway, not on such a regular basis, but so it's kind of a natural evolution really from being a documentary singer, songwriter, troubadour to being a podcast interviewer. Just new on this realm.
Well, it's interesting. Right. Well, it's interesting because, thinking about how we met, and it's awesome. Now we can talk about stuff that we both can get into. It's like, I love how things come together. How, like, 3 months ago, I didn't even know who you were.
No, it's actually being on your show because I missed that whole thing, because I got an agent for interview ballet to get me podcast interviews, because I thought a good way to promote myself would be to go on podcasts and be interviewed. So I got this, and I and I also started. So I started researching podcasts, and I got into podcast land, and I heard podcasts like yourself, and they're very inspiring. And then so after I'd done quite a few podcast interviews, then I thought, well, maybe I should do one. I think it kind of just evolved in that way. So.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you are going to get a big kick out of this. You are the first show that I have ever been on. My show, your show is the first show that that I'll have ever been on.
Wow, I did not know that.
There you go.
Oh,
there you go.
Gosh. Oh well, that's very taken. Well, that's very very interesting to know. Yeah.
You're like, no pressure, no pressure, Thom. Oh God, oh God.
So you've never been interviewed before about you?
No.
Oh.
Nope, never.
Okay, well, all right, well, so tell me about your childhood.
It was the best childhood ever. Well, it's funny, I think we might have talked about this the other day too, is that when I first started Zen Commuter, my thoughts were, I was writing a positivity podcast. I'm like, people are going to think I'm a crock of you-know-what, because my life has been amazing. I'm like, I've never had anybody, like a parent, die. I've never been stricken with an illness, or I've never gone through any, my life has been awesome. People are going to think dude, of course you write about positivity. You've had a friggin' perfect life. And so originally I thought, I'm like, nobody's going to listen. And then in my meditation, obviously, again, it's like, dude, your life has not been perfect, but you see it as perfect, and that's why it is.
Well, but the Buddha had, he had it by the side up. No, I mean,
yeah,
he didn't
exactly.
need to go out into the wilderness and sit under a tree in the rain.
I mean, if you think about that too, it's like, okay, yeah, thinking about the Buddha, it's like, you know what? I live in a palace. Things are pretty cool. Outside those walls, I'm like, wow, who knows what a hellstorm that is. I'll just stay here. But something in him drove him to say, no, I got to find out. I got to see what life's like. And then obviously he's like, whew, there's a lot going on out there. People are dying. People are sick. People are old.
But he, so I don't know, you haven't written a book, so I don't know anything. I don't actually know anything about you. So where did you grow up, Thom?
In a town called Duxbury, which is, well, you obviously know Plymouth Plantation, the Mayflower and the Pilgrims. So Duxbury is the town right next to Plymouth. Actually, I think it's 2 towns away. But it's about 30 miles south of Boston, and right on the ocean. So the second part of my childhood was we lived on the ocean. We made it to the other side of the tracks, and I say that totally tongue in cheek because we used to live inland before, modestly, and then my parents, became relatively comfortable. They're like, it's time to move. It's like the Jeffersons. You probably don't know who the Jeffersons are.
No,
it was a TV show here in the United States, but anyway.
I guess that, yeah.
But we're not African American either, so that reference might have been lost.
And what did you major? What did you major in?
Which time? So I started out as a Bachelor of Fine Arts acting major at Ithaca College.
Wow. hence the podcast voice.
Well, it's funny because it wasn't until, if you think about what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to experience life on this planet, it's amazing to hear, for the longest time, before then, actually, every time, and I say this with abject humility, so many times people say, wow, you have got a perfect voice for podcasting and for radio. I'm like, oh, that's nice of you to say, nice of you to say. And this was before, obviously, I wasn't podcasting. They didn't say podcast. Like, wow, you got a great radio voice. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Shame about the face, but...
yeah, right. You've got a great face for radio. Oh, I love that. But yeah, so when you hear enough, I'm like, I guess that's the universe's way of saying that my voice needs to be heard. So the rest is history. So yeah, so when I was and I say this with humility, you know what, I won't. I was a pretty good actor, and acting came very easily to me. When I was in high school, people used to hate me because like, are you gonna try out for that show? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, then I'm not. I'm like, why? Like, because you're gonna get the lead. I'm like, you don't know that. And then of course I would.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was natural that I go into acting. But oh, you know what? This will be a great story. So this was pre-internet, obviously, because I'm an older guy. Younger guy. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. Actually, I'm not an older guy at all, which is awesome. But I remember writing a letter to my brother. This was the first time I'd been away from home. So
Okay.
I said,
I just should say for some of our younger listeners, a letter is it's a piece of paper that you write your text message on with a pen or a pencil. No, sorry, continue.
Oh, it's awesome. So I wrote him a letter and telling him about like this weekend I had where I just got incredibly drunk. I was like, I had like so much alcohol. I was vomiting on Ithaca College was kind of on a kind of hill, and the town was down below, so you'd have to take taxis or shuttles down into the town to go to the bars and stuff. So I remember this one night I was regaling about how like, oh, dude, I was just so drunk. I hitchhiked from a pizza delivery guy that was going back to the school. I ended up puking all on the side of his car. And so I regaled this whole night of debauchery. My mom finds it. My brother either didn't destroy it or just left it out. My mother, she's not a snooper or wasn't a snooper. So she found it and she was pissed. She's like, because my parents were paying for school. And so my mom came up. She's like, you know what? She's like, she called me. She's like, we're not spending so much money so you can become an alcoholic. You're done. Until you can prove that this means something to you, you're done. So we'll be up next weekend. I'm like, oh. This was the end of the semester. I'm like, no.
Oh,
and my mom,
God.
yeah, it was so funny because my mom said, she's like, you were so pissed at me for so long. I'm like, I get it. And I'm like, I was just a snot-nosed kid. I'm like, I get it now. She's like, I had to do what I thought was right. She's like, I think I knew. And when we talk about it now, obviously, my mom passed away, but in my meditations, I talked to her. If that ever comes up, she's like, wow. But so they came up the next weekend, packed up my stuff. I'm like, okay, we're going.
So that's the whole point. I mean, of going to college in America isn't it debauchery? I mean, isn't that on the curriculum?
Well, obviously, you didn't talk to my mother because she was. I mean, to their point. I mean, obviously, school was. I mean, it was still like I think it was like $9,000 a semester.
Wow! Yeah.
Exactly. Now it's
plus bar bills, no?
Yeah, exactly. So when they came up, like that was the quietest ride home ever. I mean, I love my mom and dad, and we had the greatest relationship.
How humiliating! Yeah. Like, what did you tell your friends? I mean,
well,
oh my God. So you had to go back for a second time to study.
Yeah. So my mom and dad said, "Okay, here's the scoop. You're not just going to be bumming around. So you're going back to college, but you pick a college here in Boston, and you're going to pay for it. And if you can get between a 3.0 and a 4.0, then we'll realize that you're responsible, and then we'll start paying again." So that was a great maneuver because I ended up enrolling in at University of Massachusetts in Boston. And if I wake up and I'm like, oh, I'm blowing off this class. And I remember literally I paid for my entire semester. So I woke up and I'm like, if I miss this class, that's $89 that I've just pissed away. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not just going to piss away $89. I'm like, okay, get up, go to class. And obviously, I got the grades that I needed. My parents were like, okay, cool, we're back on.
Gosh, yeah.
So then I moved out to University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and that's where I originally started going as a hotel travel administration major.
Yeah, that's not sounding as sexy as
as an acting. Exactly. And then I said, no, it's got to be psychology. So that's what my degree is.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, there you go.
Wow, that's More? You think more? Yeah, I mean, you think the world would be a different place or an education system if everyone had to do that, like instead of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But boy, was I pissed. Oh, was I pissed.
You're still pissed. I can tell. Oh, you're forgiven, but oh, that would sting.
It did. Well, it's so funny because, obviously as meditators, and we understand why things happen the way they do. And if I look back on it, I'm like, one of the things that I love so much about meditation, about the universe, is just, you look at the world, and if you listen to the newspaper, if you just step outside, it's like, this world is so chaotic. There's like no rhyme or reason. There's no order to anything. And then because of my meditation practice, I'm like, oh my God, that couldn't be further from the truth. Everything, excuse me, is so intricately woven. Something that happened to me decades ago has put me on a path to where I am right now. So like everything, and I obviously believe this passionately, and that everything in our life brings us to a place of growth. Even if it's I'll say it and you can bleep it out, even if it's the shittiest thing ever, everything in our life brings us to a point of growth. And if we don't get locked into that victim mentality, if we don't get into the ego and the oh, woe is me, if we just say, okay, right now I'm feeling this. And meditation allows you to say, I'm like, okay, I can be pissed, I can be sad, but I don't have to buy into and get rushed into all those feelings. I can just look at them, see how they feel in my body, and just still be still. And just look. I'm like, what brought me here? Why did I bring myself here? What am I supposed to learn? And meditation is the perfect way of saying, hey, just think about this. What about that? And then you're like, oh, universe, you're awesome.
So finish the story then. What happened? What did you do with the psychology degree then?
So to that point, I ended up moving to Connecticut, where for about 6 years, I taught vocational skills to mentally challenged adults. I well up every time I think about that job. It was a job. It wasn't a job. It was just the most beautiful chapter of my life, clearly. So I did that for 6 years, and it was funny because there was no money there. So I used to wait tables at night. I used to drive the bus that brought them to the vocational center in the morning. So I'd get up at 6 o'clock, go down, get the bus, drive them around, drive around Norwalk, Connecticut, pick them up, bring them back to the workspace, and teach there. And then when that got done, then I'd get in my car, go to the Peppermill restaurant in Westport, Connecticut, and wait tables or bartend.
Jeez, to pay for your job. Gosh.
To pay for my job, exactly. Then I got to a point where I'm like, this is too much. I'm like, guy, it was the toughest job I ever had to leave. But I'm like, so I went back to Boston and kind of did the same thing. I actually counseled emotionally disturbed teenagers in a locked inpatient psych unit in Boston. Then I ran a residential treatment facility outside of Boston, and so that's kind of where I've been.
And you still do that in the daytime?
Oh God, no! That was a long time ago. So that was at one point I was at the hospital, and I was getting really burnt out. I mean, I was dealing with kids that had either been physically, sexually, or emotionally abused by their parents or somebody, and they were either wanted to kill somebody or kill themselves. So obviously that takes a toll, seeing that much pain. I'm like, I don't know if I'm being effective anymore. So I'm like, I got to go. So I got a job. I'm an artist. So I said, well, I could become an artist, but I'm like, I don't want to paint to live. So I taught myself Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, and I became a graphic designer. And then as a graphic designer, there's a company right outside of Boston, Cambridge, Mass. They basically did outsourcing of graphic designers. So I got a job there, and I was doing stuff there. there was 1 week where it was like, or 1 month where I'm like, guys, you got anything? They're like, we have nothing. I'm like, I kind of needed to eat. They're like, well, computers, like Fidelity Investments is looking for somebody to just install software on some PCs for 2 weeks. I'm like, I'll take it. So I took that, and they said, wow, you're really good. We really like your work. We like having you around. Do you want to join us? And at this point, I'm like, yeah. So I go into my boss's office, and he says, this is what we could offer you. And it was like 2.5 times what I was making doing. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah. Oh my God. And so I was there for about 10 years, 11 years. And then, I love telling this story. I was in on a Sunday just to get caught up on work. It was a beautiful day. And I went in there, and I was doing my work. And it was, at this point, I had been meditating, but not as frequently as I do. But I remember asking myself a question. I'm like, am I done here? And then I heard a voice, the voice of my guide, Bart, say, yeah, you're done. And the way he said it, or the way it resounded in my mind was, you don't mean today, do you? He's like, nope. He said, it's time to go. I said, yeah, you know what? I think you're right. There's something I have to do, and it's not here. So I spent the next half hour writing up my letter of resignation, saying, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I slid it under my the vice president's door, and out I went. I'm like, okay, it's a new chapter. And that was a story of, that's when Zen Commuter, well, that actually wasn't when Zen Commuter started. So I'm like, I want to write a book. So I said, okay, I want to write a book, but I still need money coming in. I did have my 401k, which was considerable, but I'm like, I don't want to exhaust that thing. I used a lot of it, but so I then taught myself, I've been working out at that point. So I'm like, well, I love lifting. I'm like, why don't I become a personal trainer? And that way I can have my own schedule. I can do that in the morning, then I can write in the afternoon, then I go back at night. And that's what I did. And then at one point, what's that?
So you do have a book?
Oh yeah, it's called Discovering Joy.
Oh, I should have done my research.
You're a crappy podcaster.
Oh God.
Well, the good news is, I mean, I never publicize it. I mean, it's out there, but I mean, it doesn't bring in thousands of dollars of revenue each month. It's just like, it was more for me to do than for, I'm like, I'm not going to get rich on this. I'm like, I just want to put it out there. And to be honest with you, I'm probably going to redo it and give it what it deserves, because back in the day, I'm just like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to write a book, and then 19 million people will buy it. I'm like, well, that's not how it works. You don't just put it out there and people buy it. You have to do press junkets and publish it, and so.
Well, second edition. I mean, that's a thing, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'll get it right this time.
Yeah,
it definitely went out to who it was supposed to go out to. But so that was that, and then I got fired from that job, from my personal train job, after 7 years, and I said, okay, well, you know what? That's not a bad thing, because that's when Zen Commuter and came to be. I'm like, okay, you know what? There's something else that I need to do. And I'd been thinking about this all throughout the time too. When I was personal training and writing the book, I'm like, my meditations were getting more intense, more profound. So I had taken a job just to get some income in there. So I was doing just some number crunchings, like payroll stuff. And I was on a commute, my first commute ever, and I get stuck in traffic. And I'm like, do people do this every day? They sit in traffic? I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, I'm a chill guy, but this sucks. I'm like, if I'm a chill guy and I'm getting a little worked up, I'm like, I'm sure there must be other people that are getting a little angsty. And I was, at that point, I was listening to podcasts. I'm like, I can do that. I'm like, I got to help people like get a little bit more chill as they drive to work.
Yeah.
And then that was the birth of Zen Commuter.
Gosh. So from every pain, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it's awesome. Just gosh, I've got such a profound respect, gratitude for my life. To know that, when you take it, like, just like I said, when you take yourself out of that victimhood where you say, like, and I was talking with these people yesterday, and it was great to talk to them. It's like, if we come from a standpoint that absolutely everything in our life is of our own creation, and when you stop putting responsibility or blame on other people, you live a fuller life, because you can say, I'm like, okay, right now I got fired from a job. Nobody fired me. I did something, whether it was explicit or subtle. I shifted my energy in such a way to have circumstances get moved around such a way that I am no longer here. I created this. So where am I going next? What am I supposed to do? Why did I create this? And where can I benefit the world and myself?
Because not many people do this. I mean, you could open a restaurant in California or be a journalist in Alaska, or I mean, you could just really we limit ourselves, don't we? We could just do these huge shifts anytime we wanted, and these different terrains, like you say. So yeah. Interesting. Yeah, make your own reality. Yeah.
And it's amazing, and it's neat to think about. Obviously, not that we're just human. When I think about my meditations, I'm like, oh, cool. Right now, I've got human clothes on, but that's not what I am. For want of a better word, I'm divinity. I'm divine. I am a piece of God. So, like, but I'm dressed in human clothes. I'm like,
I heard you mention Bart there. You have a guide, or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, so he's a guy who comes to me in my meditations. His name's Bartholomew, but I call him Bart for short. And I met him in a meditation probably when I was 18, and been with me ever since, pretty much. So there'll be times I'll be out in the world, and something will hit me in such a way, and he'll be like, he'll offer guidance sometimes. And he's an aspect of my higher self. And I mostly talk to him in my meditations, but many times because my meditations and my waking life are so intertwined, I hear him throughout the day. My mom and dad, I remember my brother giving me so much crap. He's like, I think you're the oldest guy I know that has an imaginary friend.
Oh, relatives and family are so cruel. They know which rib to stick the knife under, no? At the right point.
I give my brother grief right back. I'm like, you should be so lucky to have a friend like Bart.
To have a friend.
Wiser.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Right.
So how does it materialize? Do you is it an actual voice or just a thought?
So it's both. So it's thoughts, and it's interesting because there are many times that I get wisdom throughout my day that isn't Bart. So there's an energy that I feel. So basically, it's a thought that's a voice. So basically, I'll be throughout the day, and something will happen. And it'll be a thought, but it'll be a thought with an energy signature of Bart's voice, for want of a better word. Does that make sense?
Not really, but
no. So it's a thought that has its own energy pattern. So I'll know that it's him. So like, well, here's the thing. So if you're, the sound of your mother's voice, like if I was to tell you in your mind's eye, picture your mom saying, hey, Jack, it's time for dinner. You know what that sounds like, right?
Yeah,
in your head?
Yeah.
And to that same point, your best friend or calls you up on the phone, hey, you want to go out to dinner? If I was to tell you, what does that sound like in your head? You hear it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's the same with Bart and with other entities. So when I get these thoughts, I hear Bart's voice in my mind, and it's just like I'd hear any other voice. And to that point, sometimes it's him, and sometimes it's something else. But whatever it is, obviously, it's always giving me guidance and wisdom.
How do you know it's called Bartholomew?
Oh, when I first met him way back in the day, I was talking about, I'm like, am I crazy? I'm like, you existed, right? He's like, well, I don't exist in a human form now, but he's like, I did. I'm like, oh, cool. What was your name then? He's like, it was Bartholomew. I'm like, oh, cool. He's like, is that going to work for you? I'm like, well, it's better than hey, you.
So is he on another realm then, or he's waiting to reincarnate again here, or he is an aspect of your higher self?
So he's an aspect of my higher self, but he's no longer physical. So he was physical. He won't reincarnate again. He's energy.
Okay.
So
part of your group soul.
What's that?
Is he part of your group soul? Because I read that we have like part of 300 souls on this planet, sharing the same higher self. Is that?
Oh, I never heard about that. That sounds like it could be definitely the case.
It depends how much, because it depends. I think when consciousness gets split up after the astral realm, and if you've been really bad, then you'll get split up into more times so you don't do the same damage when you come back.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
So I'm not saying you've been. I'm not saying you've been. I was going to say,
you rap bastard. I'm wonderful.
Yeah. You wouldn't still be here if you were Mr. Wonderful.
well, I totally hear that, and I definitely have thought about things I have done in the past and other iterations, and I'm like, ooh, you really were nasty. I'm glad I'm honing myself.
Yeah.
Yep, I have it on good authority. This will be my last body.
Okay.
If it is, it is. If it isn't, it isn't.
Okay. Well, fingers crossed, eh?
Yeah. Good luck.
I think we'll both be coming back for quite a few.
Exactly. I'm sure we'll meet again.
Yeah. I'm kidding. Not kidding anyone.
So yeah. So that's Thom Walters and Zen Commuter in a nutshell.
Okay, you got the first time you've ever been interviewed.
Yeah, so thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. I mean, and also for the podcast advice, that's been great. But
right? Hopefully it'll be something you can use.
Yes, yeah. Also, what most inspired you with meditation? When you started? What's your earliest, like your mentor for meditation?
Oh, that's easily my mom. My mom, when I was growing up, when I was 18, she used to teach meditation to some people in the town. They'd come to our house, probably about 10 or 12 people. And my mom and two other people that were meditation teachers would teach us different aspects of meditation. And but I was 18, and my mom, I don't know if she's being unkind. I know she wasn't being unkind, but she's like, this is for adults, sweetheart. So
18. You're old enough to drink and drive. I mean, you can meditate.
So I remember being outside the door, listening to them meditate, and I was just fascinated. And then one day, my mom's like, she's like, "Do you want to join us?" I'm like, "Oh my God, yes!"
Gosh.
So I joined the group, and it was amazing. And I mean, my mom is amazing because she's still such a pivotal part of wisdom for me. Mm-hmm. Ever since I was talking about earlier about how can I talk about a positive life when my life hasn't been anything other than perfect. I'm like, with the parents I grew up with and the town I grew up in, like, life was pretty good. But I mean, having my mom and dad as teachers, I mean, my mom, oh God, she was so ahead of her time, is ahead of her time. I remember her teaching me things, and I'm like, I remember when I was younger, I'm like, woman, you are crazy. I remember the one of the biggest lessons she had was about expectation. And I was like 14 years old, and I forget what I wanted to have happen. I'm like, oh, Mom, this has got to happen. She's like, no expectation, sweetheart. I'm like, what? No, of course there's expectation. It's got to happen this way, this way, this way, this way, this way. This is what's going to happen, or everything else will be to shit, and like everything will be over. she kept repeating, "No expectations, sweetheart." I'm like, "Oh, woman, I don't know what your problem is." And some odd years later, I'm like, "Oh, that's what you talked about. We don't
So
set ourselves
was
up
she
for pain."
Buddhist then, or?
No, it's funny because she wasn't. But if I think about it, many of her beliefs were of a Buddhist nature, obviously of compassion, of love, of kindness, of growth. But no, she's never. And now she was raised Catholic until she said, "I'm not going to feed into a religion that deems me a second-class citizen." So that's done. Yeah, my mom was pretty amazing.
But did you study Buddhism afterwards then? I mean, to come later?
Yeah, no, I'd say that's probably been coming the past 5 years, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you officially class yourself as a Buddhist now, or?
I definitely don't, because much like any group religion, I'm like, I don't want to link myself to a religion, whether it be one that I feel resonates with me as well, because that's still a manifestation of my ego and my desire to belong to a group.
Okay.
I would say most of my thoughts are of a Buddhist nature, but I definitely wouldn't call myself a Buddhist because for the reason I just said.
So if you could condense down what meditation style do you do? Do you follow the breath, or?
Yep, pretty much the breath. And much like I tell many of my listeners, I'm like, a meditation practice is supposed to be with you for a lifetime. So if you did the same thing day in and day out for a lifetime, you get pretty bored pretty quick. So sometimes I'll do a sitting meditation, but for the most part, I start off following my breath and putting my focus there. But it changes up.
Okay.
Depending on the day.
Just to get tips from the master, yeah.
Well, where is he? Let's talk. Let's dial him in.
Yeah.
Let's get him on the line.
So what? Just to finish up, then, what would be the biggest? Because everyone has the grasshopper mind. So when you sit down, what's the best way to quieten the mind for you, from your experience, to get into the zone when you're meditating?
Well, I think one of the things to be aware of is kind of what my mom just talked about. It's like no expectation. So one of the best things to realize about a meditation is that it's never going to be the same. I mean, there are days that I go to sit down and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's going to be a good episode for a podcast. I'm like, dude, okay, back to breath. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There's breath. I'm like, oh, you know what? I got to pick up bread. I'm like, damn it, back to breath. There'll be days when it's like that. It is for me after meditating for over 37 years. So you have to be aware that I'm like, if it comes, you just refocus. And there might be a point where you're like, there have been times that I'm like, it's just not happening today. I'm like, back to breath. I'm like, okay. And it's very rare, obviously, but I'm like, it's not happening today. Maybe later on today, but it's not happening right now. My mind is just too crazy. Mm-hmm. And I'll just go off meditation and I'll do it a little later on. But you can't give up too easy. You can't just say, oh, I guess it's not going to happen today. You got to really back to breath, thought, back to breath. And when you're beginning meditating, that's when it can get really frustrating because that's what it is a lot. But obviously, as you become more proficient, not that you'll become the best meditator per se, there'll be days where you're just like, cool, close my eyes, focus on my breath, and then the world just becomes expansive and you're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm looking for. But be patient. So don't have expectations. To clear your mind, don't ever, and I shouldn't say that so emphatically, but I guess I say that so emphatically because that's one of the hugest misperceptions about meditation. People are like, I don't know how to meditate because I can't clear my mind. I'm like, well, you're never going to clear your mind unless you're dead.
And even then,
clear your mind.
Even then.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been proven.
Right, exactly. So the goal of meditation is to just see and be with thoughts and not get drawn into them. You can sense anger and not be angry. Like when you get angry, your heart starts beating. Your breathing might be a little intense. You might feel heat in certain parts of your body.
Mm-hmm.
With a meditation practice, you can say, "Okay, I'm feeling angry," and not be like, "I want to kill that mother son of a." Just
hey, I don't edit this podcast, so please don't do any of that.
Well, you're going to get your editing out now.
I've no time.
I have no time. But yeah, so no expectations. Don't try and clear your mind. Be with what is. If you're really new to meditation, start doing it at the same time every day, whenever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Just all about the breath.
All about the breath. Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, Thom, this has been great.
This has been absolutely awesome, as I thought it would be. We only talked for an hour and a half. That's great.
Yeah.
I could talk for hours to you, my friend.
No, I'm sure. What do you have planned for the rest of the day?
I'm going to grab a workout. I'm going to go out to lunch with a couple friends of mine. Saturday, believe it or not, is when I start planning for the week. So I usually go see my dad on Sunday, so I don't have that. So today is usually kind of a low-key work day. So I'll plan all the episodes for Zen Commuter and Calmer in 5. I'm working on a course that's going to be coming out about how to create meditation consistency. So I have to do a little bit of that.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a little bit of work, but
where can people find out about that? Where's the place to go to get more Thom Walters?
So they can either follow me on Twitter, Thom_Walters, or obviously just go to zencommuter.com.
Okay.
And and they'll be able to sign up for the newsletter and meditation resource guide. And then they'll be in the know about all the things that are coming out for Zen Commuter, Calmer in 5, or just meditation related.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm heading straight over.
Nice.
I'm already subscribed, so
I'm just gonna say, I think I have it on good resource. You might already be there.
Yeah.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for today. What are you going to do today?
I got to work on songs. Got to write songs.
Thom, you're done. You're done with this interview. I got to do stuff.
Yeah. As I do every day. Yeah, it's I've taken on a monster, but I'm enjoying it. So yeah,
labor of love, I'm sure.
Yeah,
If it isn't, then it won't last long.
No, I love every part. Yeah,
absolutely. So, what's the weather like in Italy right now? Tease me.
It's just crazy hot. So I'm in my air-conditioned spare room here, covered in curtains, and not great outside. Until the sun goes down.
Yep, yeah, I hear that.
Yeah.
Well, you stay cool. I'm going to start my day. You're going to finish your day.
Yeah.
But we'll be in touch within the next week. Just say hey and keep going.
Yeah, we'll chat again at the 1500th episode, yeah?
Yeah, I can't wait.
All right.
Well, Jack, you have a great rest of the day, and thank you for this time today. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
I loved it too. Thanks, Thom.
Take care, bud.
Build your body and hone yourself an incredible physique. Perform fantastic physical feats that must be seen to be believed. But can you breathe and only breathe? Yes, can you breathe and only breathe? Or by an education that's the envy of all, become an economic mastermind, know the workings of the world. But can you breathe and only breathe? Yes, can you breathe and only breathe? What good
can steal your mind and hold it on a call. Are you the master of your mind? Study the languages, learn Sanskrit and Greek. Understand the ancient texts and long-forgotten techniques, but can you breathe? Only breathe. Yes, can you breathe? What good is such a powerful force if you can't steal your mind and hold it on a course? Are you the master of your mind? Become a leader of the military with power over men. Put a country to the sword or show mercy upon them. But can you breathe? Only breathe. Yes, can you breathe? Only breathe. What good is such a powerful force if you can't steal your mind and hold it on a course? Are you the master of your mind? Are you the master of your mind? Are you the master of your mind?
Thanks, Thom. Wow, I think we're all very relaxed now. Let's go into our day in a positive way. Listen to Zen Commuter. Subscribe on your podcast host. Also to Podsongs. Subscribe. Spread. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you want to hear the song, go to Spotify, iTunes, or download from podsongs.com. This is the 12th song we've done with Podsongs, and I'm releasing every 12 songs as an album. I've called it Podsongs 1 to 12, which is quite an original title, I think you'll agree. You can download that for $10 or €10 from podsongs.com, and if you can do that, that would really help support the show and keep us going. Thank you to the musicians Maurizio Sannicola, Massimino Fozza, and Dori Verba, my researcher, and to you, the listener. Thanks again for tuning in. See you next time.